And that brings us to districts. So districts are essentially areas of identity. They are they are places that the player can describe themselves as being inside or outside of. I am inside the shopping district. I am to the south of the shopping district and not inside of it. That sort of thing. You know, and this, when we talk about level design, a lot of times I want to equate sort of this idea of a district with the idea of a spatial cluster, as we were talking about last week. And if you remember from last week, we talked about how a spatial cluster needs to have identity, essentially understanding that this space is different from a space that's adjacent to it, and that's sort of a sense of identity. And when we talk about sort of this idea of districts, it kind of goes hand in hand with that, that we understand that we are inside of a spatial cluster, we are inside of a district, or we are outside of it. Where are we in relation to that? So most people sort of break their map image into districts. So in how they sort of lay out complicated spaces, especially when there's a lack of paths involved. For many people, in fact, districts are more dominant than paths, and I think that's especially the true in a level design perspective. And I really like to encourage designers to lay out their levels with districts in mind, so that they can sort of go hand in hand with how people lay out spaces in their head, in their cognitive map. So if we look at this space right here, we've got a couple of pretty noticeable districts. We've got sort of this beach area right here, which seems like it has a nice as the sort of the beach tapers right here. We have sort of a imaginary cutoff point where this is where the end of this beach is. This is where the end of this beach is. Maybe this is a separate sort of district that has identity from this one. We've got two different swimming areas right here, and although in real life they may not have a lot of identity on their own, if we were designing this in a game, we really want to make sure that this one over here feels very distinct from this, so that we understand that we're in one district versus the other. And we have this deep water district out here. We've got this housing sort of district, and you can maybe even call each sort of house, or maybe a structure of a house, being a district unto itself. And maybe we can't see that as well from this sort of top-down perspective. From a level design perspective, we may want to accentuate that. And here we have sort of a street sort of district. So as the player would move from one to another, they understand sort of a sense of progression of, like, I progressed from a street to houses to the beach, and I understand that those align in a sort of linear fashion, and then I can sort of use that information to sort of navigate back the other way from the beach to the buildings, and then expect the street area, the road area, to be there. And that's how they use districts in order to lay out a cognitive map. A lot of times districts are represented by buildings. So what's great about a building is that it's a very clear edge around the space, as we're talking about edges that define districts. So a wall around a space creates a building, well, of course with a ceiling and stuff like that, but we've got a very well-defined space, and you understand that you're either inside or outside of a building. Or very well we could have a cluster of buildings, or maybe connect sort of a couple of buildings sort of. It makes sense to sort of connect them as sort of a district unto their own and stuff like that. So it's kind of hard to quite see here, but when you lay out your level, that's something I want you to really keep in mind. How can I create districts of identity?